The winter of my past life was a merciless beast, its icy claws sinking deep into the earth and my heart. Snow blanketed the military district, muffling the world, but it couldn't silence the screams in my mind as I cradled my son Ethan's ashes. He was only 17, his life snuffed out in a freezing prison cell, executed for a crime he didn't commit. With his gentle eyes and dreams of becoming a teacher, my boy was reduced to a cold urn in my trembling hands. I stumbled through the district gates, my breath clouding in the air, driven by a mother's desperate need for justice. I sought my husband, Brian Sanders, the regimental commander, a man whose name once filled me with pride but now tasted like ash on my tongue. The guard at the gate barely glanced at me, my worn coat and tear-streaked face marking me as insignificant. "Commander Sanders is busy," he muttered, waving me off. But I persisted, my voice raw, until he relented, pointing me toward the officers' hall. The warmth inside stung my frostbitten hands, but nothing prepared me for the awaited sight. Laughter and music spilled from the banquet room, where a wedding was in full swing. Brian stood at the center, resplendent in his uniform, his arm around a woman in a flowing white dress. Rachel, the widow of his fallen comrade, smiled radiantly, her hand resting on the shoulder of her son, Kevin. The room toasted their union, oblivious to the widow in tattered shoes clutching her son's remains. My knees buckled, but I forced myself forward, the urn heavy against my chest. "Brian," I croaked, my voice cutting through the revelry. Heads turned, murmurs rippling like a stone in a pond. His eyes met mine, and for a fleeting moment, I saw guilt flicker before it hardened into annoyance. "Jenny, what are you doing here?" he hissed, pulling me aside. I thrust the urn toward him, tears streaming. "Ethan's dead. He was executed for something he didn't do. You have to make this right." My words tumbled out, jagged and pleading, but Brian's face remained stone cold. He led me to a quiet corner, Rachel trailing behind, her expression a mask of pity. "Tell me," I demanded, "who framed my son?" Brian's jaw tightened, but Rachel's eyes darted to Kevin, who lingered nearby, smirking faintly. The truth hit me like a blade. Kevin was the culprit, a delinquent who'd paid for a scapegoat to take the fall for his crime. Hooliganism, assault, a scandal swept under the rug. My innocent boy Ethan had been sacrificed to save Kevin's future. While Kevin assumed Ethan's identity, enrolling in college and charming a fiancée, my son's body lay in a patch of yellow earth, forgotten by all but me. I sank to my knees, the urn slipping to the floor. "You knew," I whispered, staring at Brian. "You let our son die." He frowned as if my grief were an inconvenience. "He's gone, Jenny. That's the reality. Making a fuss won't change it." Rachel stepped forward, her voice syrupy. "We're willing to help, Jenny. Take this $100 and start over. Kevin's future can't be ruined over someone already dead." Her words were a slap, her pity a lie. Brian nodded, his tone final. "Be reasonable. Don't make this more complicated than it needs to be." Reasonable? My son's life was bartered for a pittance, and they dared call me unreasonable? I clutched the urn, Ethan's memory burning in my chest. I remembered his last letter from prison, scrawled in shaky handwriting. "Mom, don't worry about me. Live well. I'll repay you in my next life." His words had kept me alive then, but now they fueled my rage. I rose, my voice steady despite the tears. "If you don't give Ethan justice, I'll find another way." Brian's eyes narrowed, but I turned, the weight of their betrayal pressing me forward. That night, I knelt at Ethan's grave, the snow soaking my clothes. The urn rested before me, a silent witness to my failure. I had been a timid wife, trusting Brian, believing his absences were duty, not deceit. I'd fed Rachel's child, mended her clothes, and called her sister, never seeing the ambition in her eyes. My kindness had cost Ethan everything. "I'm sorry, my boy," I whispered, my fingers tracing the urn's edge. I wasn't strong enough. Despair swallowed me, and in that moment, I made a choice. I lifted a vial of poison to my lips, its bitter taste mingling with my tears. "If there's another life," I vowed, "I'll protect you. I'll make them pay." As the poison coursed through me, the world dimmed, but my heart burned with a mother's love and a promise unbroken. I would not let Ethan's death be in vain. The cold claimed me, but my vow lingered, a spark waiting to ignite. The poison's bitter chill coursed through me as I knelt at Ethan's grave, the snow swallowing my final breaths. My vision blurred, the urn's cold surface slipping from my fingers, but my vow burned brighter than the pain. I'll protect you, Ethan. I'll make them pay. As darkness claimed me, a searing light erupted, not from the sky, but from within. My mother's love, Ethan's unavenged soul, and a force beyond this world weaving together in a desperate plea for another chance. The light pulsed, warm and fierce, pulling me from death's grasp. I gasped, my eyes snapping open, and found myself not in a snowy graveyard but in our cramped village home, the air thick with the scent of boiled millet. It was the day before Ethan was to be framed. The calendar on the wall read a date I'd never forget. The moment Brian's betrayal would set Ethan on a path to ruin. My hands trembled, not from cold but from the weight of this miracle. I touched my face, feeling the scars of labor but none of the poison's sting. My heart raced. Reborn, I was alive, gifted a chance to rewrite our fate. Ethan's cot was empty, his school bag slung over a chair. Panic seized me. Where was he? I stumbled to the door, calling his name, my voice hoarse with fear. Mom? Ethan's voice came from the yard where he was chopping wood, his thin frame bundled in a patched jacket. The sight of him, alive, whole, his cheeks flushed from the cold, broke something in me. I ran to him, pulling him into my arms, tears soaking his shoulder. Mom, what's wrong? He asked, his brow furrowing. I couldn't tell him the truth, not yet. How could I explain the nightmare of his death, the urn in my hands, or the light that brought me back? Instead, I cupped his face, memorizing every feature. I had a bad dream, I whispered. Promise me you'll stay safe. He nodded, confused but earnest. I promise. His warmth grounded me, but the clock was ticking. Brian's plan to frame Ethan for Kevin's crime was already in motion. I remembered the police's visit tomorrow, their false accusations of hooliganism meant to trap my son. I wouldn't let it happen. My past life's timidity had cost Ethan everything. This time, I'd be his shield. I sat Ethan down, my mind racing with a plan. We're going to the city today, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. There's something we need to do. I dug through a hidden compartment in the closet, retrieving my father's military service medal, its weight a reminder of his unspoken heroism. In my past life, I'd honored his dying wish never to use it, but now it was my lifeline. I packed a small bag, my hands moving with purpose. Ethan watched, his questions piling up. Why the medal? Where are we going? I forced a smile. To secure your future. The truth was too heavy. I needed to enroll him in the National Seed Program, a government initiative for promising students, to protect him from Brian's reach. At the district office, I pushed through a crowd of clerks, clutching the medal like a talisman. The official, a stern woman with pinned hair, eyed me skeptically. What's this about? She demanded. I laid the medal on her desk, its gleam cutting through her indifference. My son, Ethan, deserves a chance, I said, my voice unwavering. This medal proves our family's loyalty. Please approve his application for the National Seed Program. She hesitated, then softened, recognizing the medal's significance. Hours later, we left with a stamped certificate, Ethan's future safeguarded, at least for now. Back home, exhaustion hit, but sleep was a luxury I couldn't afford. I sat by the oil lamp, memories of my past life flooding back. Ethan in a prison cell, his hands gripping mine through bars, whispering, "Live well, Mom." Brian's cold dismissal at his wedding, Rachel's smug pity, Kevin's stolen life built on my son's grave. Each image fueled my resolve, but doubt gnawed at me. Could I outsmart Brian, a commander with connections? Could I protect Ethan from Rachel's venom? The light that reborn me hadn't promised victory, only a chance. I clenched my fists, the medal's edge biting into my palm. This time I'd fight. Ethan stirred in his sleep, murmuring my name. I knelt beside him, brushing hair from his forehead. No one will take you from me, I vowed softly. Tomorrow I'd contact a journalist to expose Brian's bigamy, a first strike to unravel his lies. The road ahead was treacherous, but the light that brought me back burned in my chest, a mother's love forged into purpose. I would tear down Brian's world, piece by piece, and give Ethan the life he deserved. The lamplight flickered in our village home, casting shadows on the cracked walls as I sat by Ethan's cot, my heart still racing from the day's victory. The National Seed Program certificate lay tucked in my bag, a fragile shield against Brian's looming betrayal. But as I watched Ethan sleep, his chest rose softly, and doubt crept in. Could I protect him from the storm I was about to unleash? My rebirth had given me a chance, but it hadn't erased the fear of failing him again. The memory of his ashes in my past life lingered, a weight heavier than the military medal in my pocket. Ethan stirred, his eyes fluttering open. "Mom," he mumbled, squinting in the dim light. "Why aren't you sleeping?" His voice, soft but curious, pulled me from my thoughts. I forced a smile, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead, and just thinking, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. He sat up, his patched jacket slipping off his shoulders, and studied me with a frown. "You've been acting strange all day. The city, the medal, that certificate, what's going on?" His questions were sharp, his gaze searching, and I realized I couldn't shield him with half-truths forever. I took a deep breath, the air thick with the scent of damp wood and millet porridge. "Ethan, I had a nightmare," I began, choosing my words carefully. "In it, you were in danger, taken from me. I can't let that happen." It wasn't the whole truth. How could I tell him of his execution, the urn, the poison I'd swallowed? But it was enough to convey my fear. His face hardened, not with fear, but with a quiet strength that startled me. "Who's trying to hurt me?" he asked, his voice low, his hands clenching the blanket. "Is it Dad?" The question pierced me. Ethan had always sensed Brian's distance, the letters that dwindled, the allowances that stopped. But to hear him name it so plainly at 17 broke my heart. I hesitated, then nodded. "I said your father's choices could harm us," my voice trembling. "I'm doing everything I can to keep you safe." Ethan's jaw tightened, his eyes glinting with something fierce. "Then let me help," he said. "I'm not a kid anymore. If Dad's against us, I'll stand with you." His words stirred a mix of pride and dread. I saw the boy who'd carried water for neighbors and studied by candlelight despite hunger, now ready to fight for our survival. But I also saw the boy who'd gripped my hand in a prison cell, promising to repay me in his next life. I couldn't let him face Brian's cruelty head on, not yet. I said, "You're already helping," squeezing his hand by staying strong and trusting me. "That certificate means you'll have a future, no matter what happens." Ethan leaned back, his expression softening but not relenting. "I've always wanted to make you proud, Mom," he said quietly. "Growing up, I saw how you worked the fields and never complained, even when we had nothing. If I studied hard and got into college, I could give you a better life. But if Dad's trying to stop that, I won't let him." His voice cracked, revealing the weight he'd carried, the guilt of a son who felt he'd burdened me. Tears pricked my eyes, but I held them back. "You've never been a burden," I said firmly. "You're my reason to keep going." He nodded, but his eyes drifted to the window, where dawn's first light crept over the horizon. "What's next?" he asked, his tone resolute. I took a moment, weighing how much to share. Tomorrow, I'd contact a journalist to expose Brian's bigamy, a move that would shake the military district and put us in danger. But Ethan deserved to know our path, if not its full peril. "We're going to tell the truth," I said, "about your father, about what he's done. It won't be easy, but it's the only way to protect you." Ethan's gaze met mine, steady and unyielding. "Then we'll do it together," he said. "I don't know what you're planning, but I trust you. Don't carry this alone." His words were a vow, echoing my own at his grave, and they strengthened my resolve. I hugged him tightly, his warmth a reminder of why I'd returned. I promised we'd face it together, though my heart ached knowing what lay ahead. Brian's rage, Rachel's venom, Kevin's malice. As Ethan drifted back to sleep, I stood by the window, the military medal heavy in my hand. The journalist's name burned in my mind, a spark to ignite our fight. Ethan's resolve had lit a fire in me too. He wasn't just a victim to save, he was my partner, his strength a mirror of my own. The light that reborn me pulsed faintly, a reminder of the vow that bound us. Tomorrow we'd take our first step toward justice, and I'd ensure Ethan never saw the inside of a prison cell again. Dawn broke over the village, painting the sky in streaks of fire as I prepared to strike the first blow against Brian's lies. Ethan and I boarded a rattling bus to the city, the National Seed Program certificate tucked safely in my bag alongside my father's military medal. Ethan sat beside me, his jaw set, his eyes scanning the road ahead. "You sure about this, Mom?" he asked, his voice low but steady. I nodded, gripping his hand. "Exposing your father's betrayal is the only way to keep you safe." He squeezed my hand back, his resolve mirroring mine, though I saw the flicker of fear in his gaze. My reborn heart pounded. This was our chance to unravel Brian's world. At the provincial newspaper office, the air smelled of ink and coffee. I pushed past skeptical clerks to reach Miss Liang, a journalist known for tackling military scandals. Her sharp eyes sized me up as I laid the medal on her desk. I said I was Jenny, the wife of Commander Brian Sanders, and my voice was unwavering. He's keeping 2 women in military housing, Rachel and me, his comrade's widow. He's framing my son, Ethan, to protect her son's crimes. Ethan stood tall beside me, his presence a quiet strength. Ms. Liang's pen scratched furiously as I detailed Brian's bigamy, Kevin's hooliganism, and the police's impending visit to arrest Ethan falsely. The metal gleamed, lending weight to my words. By noon, Ms. Liang promised a front-page story. "This will shake the district," she warned. "Be ready for backlash." I nodded, my stomach churning. Ethan's hand brushed mine, his voice soft. "Whatever happens, we're doing this together." His trust fueled my courage, but fear gnawed at me. Brian's rage would be swift. We returned home, the village buzzing with whispers of the article. By afternoon, the newspaper hit the stands, its headlines screaming, "Regimental Commander's Double Life, Bigamy and Corruption in Military Housing." Public outrage erupted, with villagers crowding the market, cursing Brian's name. The door slammed open hours later, and Brian stormed in, his uniform crisp, but his face twisted with fury. "You ignorant hick!" he roared, his hand stroking my cheek before I could react. Pain flared, but I stood firm, my eyes locked on his. Ethan lunged forward, grabbing a wooden stick from the corner. "Don't touch her!" he shouted, planting himself between us, his glare fierce. Brian froze, startled by Ethan's defiance, but Rachel slipped in behind him, her face a mask of crocodile tears. "Sister, it's my fault," she sobbed, clutching Brian's arm. "Blame me, not him. He's innocent." Her act was transparent, her pity a venomous lie. I ignored her, my stinging cheek fueling my resolve. "Answer me, Brian," I said, each word deliberate. "Yesterday, the police came to arrest Ethan for hooliganism. Was that your doing? Did you frame him for Kevin's crime?" Their faces betrayed them. Brian's jaw clenched, and Rachel's eyes darted away. Guilt flashed across their features, confirming my reborn knowledge. Ethan's grip on the stick tightened, his voice shaking. "You'd sell me out for him?" he asked, staring at his father. Brian's silence was damning, his eyes cold. Rachel's sobs grew louder, a performance for no one. "Jenny, please forgive us," she pleaded, but her gaze held malice. I stepped closer, my voice cutting through her farce. "You let Kevin steal Ethan's future while you live in luxury. How dare you beg forgiveness?" Brian's patience snapped. "Enough!" he bellowed. "Kevin's a better student, a better prospect. If Ethan takes the blame, so what? He's not worth ruining Kevin's life." His words were a blade, slicing through any lingering hope. Ethan's face paled, but he didn't waver, his stick still raised. My heart burned, not with pain, but with fury. In my past life, Brian's dismissal had driven me to despair. Now, it forged my resolve. "You call yourself a father?" I spat, my voice steady despite the tears. "Ethan's your son, and you'd sacrifice him for a stranger's child?" Ethan's eyes met mine, a mix of hurt and determination. "I don't need him," he said quietly, lowering the stick, but not his guard. "I've got you, Mom." His words were a lifeline, pulling me from the edge of rage. I turned to Brian, and my decision was clear. This article is just the start. I'll tear down your lies until Ethan is safe. Brian's face reddened, but Rachel's eyes gleamed with calculation, her tears drying fast. "You'll regret this," she hissed, her mask slipping. Brian grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the door. "This isn't over," he warned, his voice low. As they left, Ethan dropped the stick, his shoulders slumping. "Did I make it worse?" he asked, his voice small. I hugged him tightly, his warmth grounding me. "No, you were brave," I said. "We've shaken them. Now we keep fighting." The newspaper lay on the table, its bold print a beacon of hope. The military district would feel the ripples tomorrow, and I'd be ready. The village night was heavy with silence, broken only by the creak of our roof under a restless wind. Ethan slept fitfully, the newspaper's bold headline, "Commander's Double Life," still crumpled on the table. My cheek throbbed from Brian's slap, but it was Rachel's crocodile tears that haunted me, her false pity masking a venom I'd failed to see in my past life. As I sat by the lamp's dim glow, the weight of my reborn mission pressed down. Exposing Brian was only the beginning. Rachel's shadow loomed larger, her betrayal rooted in years I'd mistaken for sisterhood. To protect Ethan, I needed to understand her, how kindness had turned to treachery. Years ago, Rachel arrived at our military compound, a battlefield nurse widowed by war, her eyes hollow with grief. Her husband, Brian's comrade, had died in a skirmish, leaving her pregnant and frail. I saw myself in her struggle, a military wife tethered to duty, and opened my home. When labor struck, I carried her through the mud to the hospital, her screams echoing in my ears. After Kevin's birth, she was too weak to nurse, so I fed him with my milk, cradling him alongside Ethan. "You're my sister," she'd whispered, tears in her eyes. I believed her, blind to the ambition brewing beneath her gratitude. Ethan stirred, murmuring, and I gently brushed his hair. His trust in me, forged in yesterday's confrontation, was a lifeline. "Mom, why'd she lie?" he'd asked after Brian and Rachel left, his voice thick with betrayal. I'd deflected then, but now I faced the truth. Rachel's envy had grown as she cared for Brian during his recovery from a battlefield injury. I'd carried him from a pile of corpses, my shin bone fracturing under his weight, yet Rachel's deft hands and soft words won his heart. She saw my marriage as a prize, a commander's wife, a step up from her widow's pension, and plotted to claim it. In those days, I cooked her meals, mended her clothes, and ignored Brian's lingering glances at her. When his letters grew sparse and military allowances stopped, I blamed his duties, not her charm. Ethan and I ate dry millet while Rachel and Kevin lived in a villa Brian built, their piano lessons mocking our poverty. "Why doesn't Dad write?" Ethan had asked, his young face creased with worry. I'd lied, shielding him, but Rachel's shadow had already fallen. She'd siphoned Brian's loyalty, whispering lies that Ethan was unworthy, paving the way for Kevin's stolen future. Now, reborn, I saw her for what she was, a manipulator who'd framed Ethan to secure Kevin's college dreams. Her tears yesterday were no accident. They were a performance to keep Brian's favor and bury her guilt. I clenched my father's metal, its cold edges grounding me. In my past life, I'd confronted her too late, overhearing her admit to arranging Ethan's scapegoating. "I handled it," she'd told Brian, her voice smug. That memory fueled my resolve, but Ethan's question echoed, "Why?" Rachel's ambition wasn't just greed, but a widow's fear of obscurity, twisted into malice. I glanced at Ethan, his face peaceful despite the storm we faced. I whispered that you were right to stand up to them, recalling his defiance with the stick. His courage had shaken Rachel, her eyes flickering with unease. But I worried. Would his bravery draw her wrath? I needed to act fast. Tomorrow, I'd gather evidence of her role in framing Ethan, perhaps through Kevin's school records or witnesses. The newspaper had cracked Brian's facade. Rachel's turn was next. But doubt gnawed at me. Could I outmaneuver her cunning without endangering Ethan further? The lamp flickered, casting her shadow in my mind. Rachel, smiling as she took my place, her hands stained with Ethan's fate. I remembered her postpartum weakness, how I'd spoon-fed her soup and felt a pang of betrayal. "How could you?" I murmured, my voice lost in the night. Ethan's words from yesterday steadied me. "I've got you, Mom." His strength was my anchor. I rose, tucking the metal away. Rachel's shadow would not consume us. I'd expose her, not with tears but with truth, and ensure Ethan's light burned brighter than her darkness. The village morning was brittle, the air sharp with frost as Ethan and I returned from the market, our meager groceries weighing heavy in my arms. The newspaper's expose on Brian's bigamy still rippled through the village, whispers trailing us like shadows. Ethan walked beside me, his eyes scanning the dirt path, his silence heavier than usual. "You okay?" I asked, nudging him. He forced a smile, but his voice was tight. "I'm just thinking about Dad. How could he choose them over us?" His hurt cut me, but before I could answer, we reached our home, and my heart sank. The door hung ajar, splinters marking where it had been forced. I dropped the groceries and rushed inside, and Ethan was close behind. The room was a wreck. Drawers were yanked open and papers were strewn across the floor. My breath caught as I saw Ethan's National Seed Program file, his ticket to a future, torn to shreds, its pages scattered like confetti. Ethan fell to his knees, frantically gathering the pieces, his hands shaking. "No, no, no," he muttered, taping fragments together, his face pale with desperation. I turned, and there stood Kevin, Rachel's son, leaning against the wall, hands in his pockets, whistling a careless tune. His smirk was a blade, his eyes glinting with malice. "You did this," I said, my voice low, fury rising like a tide. Kevin shrugged, his whistle fading. "Oops," he sneered. "Ethan's dreams are trash now." His cruelty stunned me, a mirror of Rachel's venom. Ethan stood, clutching the ruined file, his voice trembling but fierce. "Why? What did I ever do to you?" Kevin's smirk widened. "You're in my way. No college for you, no program. Stay in the dirt where you belong." His words were a taunt meant to break us, but they ignited my rage. I stepped forward and slapped him hard across the face, the sound echoing in the small room. Kevin stumbled, his cheek reddening, but his eyes narrowed, venomous. "You'll pay for that," he hissed. Before I could respond, Brian's voice thundered from the doorway. "What's going on here?" He stormed in, his uniform crisp, his face a mask of anger. Rachel trailed behind, her expression shifting from feigned concern to satisfaction. I pointed at Kevin. "Your stepson destroyed Ethan's future. Look at this." Brian glanced at the torn papers, then at Kevin, but his eyes held no surprise, only annoyance. Ethan stepped forward, his voice breaking. "Dad, you knew, didn't you? You let him do this." Brian's silence was a confession, his gaze cold. My heart pounded as I confronted him. "How could you let Kevin ruin your son?" Brian's patience snapped. "He's not worth Kevin's potential," he roared. In a flash, he grabbed Ethan's arm, twisting it until a sickening pop echoed, his shoulder dislocated. Ethan cried out, and Brian shoved him toward the charcoal brazier blazing in the corner. Ethan fell, his back landing on the hot coals, the sizzle of flesh piercing the air. I screamed, rushing to him as blisters formed on his skin, the acrid smell of burned cloth and flesh choking me. Ethan gritted his teeth, his face contorted in pain, but he didn't cry. "Mom, I'm okay," he gasped, his voice a fragile lie. Brian loomed over us, snarling, "Don't test me, Jenny. Everything in this house, including that boy's life, is mine to control." Rachel's eyes gleamed, her silence complicit. I cradled Ethan, my hands trembling, and glared at Brian. "You're no father. You're a monster." Ignoring their presence, I focused on Ethan, lifting him gently. "We're going to the hospital," I said, my voice steady despite the chaos. Kevin's smirk lingered as Rachel clutched Brian's arm, whispering, "Let's go, darling." They left, their footsteps fading, but their cruelty stayed, etched in Ethan's burns. At the hospital, doctors rushed Ethan into surgery, their faces grim. "The burns are severe," one said. "If it's any worse, we'd need skin grafts." I sat in the sterile waiting room, my hands clasped, guilt gnawing at me. Had my exposé provoked this? Ethan emerged hours later, bandaged and pale, but his eyes held a stubborn spark. "Mom, don't cry," he said, his voice hoarse. I pushed them too, standing up to Kevin. "This isn't your fault." His selflessness broke me, but it also steeled my resolve. "You're braver than I deserve," I said, squeezing his hand. "But they'll pay for this." He nodded, his gaze distant. "I just wanted Dad to see me, but he never will." His words, raw with a son's longing, fueled my vow. Brian and Kevin would face justice, and Rachel's shadow would fall. The hospital's antiseptic scent clung to us as Ethan and I trudged back to the village, the night sky a bruise above us. His bandaged back forced him to stroll, each step a grimace, but he refused my arm. "I'm fine, Mom," he said, his voice stubborn despite the pain. The burns from Brian's assault seared my mind as much as they did Ethan's skin. The newspaper's exposé had rattled Brian, but Kevin's cruelty and Rachel's complicity had pushed him to violence. My reborn resolve burned. Justice was closer, but tonight we needed shelter. The village loomed, its lanterns dim, and our home promised warmth. Or so I thought. The door was locked, and the keyhole jammed with a fresh pin. I rattled the handle, my heart sinking. "Brian," I muttered, pounding the wood. No answer. Ethan leaned against the wall, shivering, his feverish cheeks glowing in the moonlight. "They did this," he said, his voice low, bitter. Snow began to fall, soft at first, then heavier, clinging to our thin coats. I banged harder, my knuckles raw. "Open the door! Ethan's sick!" A light flickered inside, and Rachel's voice, breathy and mocking, drifted through. "Babe, someone's out there!" Brian's laugh followed, cold as the wind. "Let them freeze. They'll learn." Their words were a gut punch, their intimacy a betrayal sharper than Brian's slap. Ethan's eyes met mine, his anger mirroring my own. He is doing this to break his breath, which is clouding in the cold. I wrapped my cotton coat around him, its thin fabric little defense against the snow. "We won't break," I said, my voice fiercer than I felt. But Ethan's fever was climbing, his body trembling. I knelt at the door, banging my forehead against the frame, desperation clawing at me. Please, he can't handle this cold. Only silence answered, punctuated by Rachel's soft moans, a cruel taunt of their warmth inside. Ethan slumped against me, his heat alarming. "Mom, I'm sorry," he whispered. "If I hadn't fought Kevin, maybe—" His guilt tore at me. "This isn't your fault," I said, cupping his face. "You stood up for what's right. I'm proud of you." His eyes, clouded with pain, held a spark of resolve. "We'll get through this," he said, forcing a weak smile. But the snow piled higher, and the village offered no refuge. Brian's influence ensured no neighbor dared help. My savings scraped together for Ethan's college, our only hope for a hospital or inn, but I had to get inside. I pried at a loose board near the window, my fingers numb. Ethan, despite his pain, helped, his determination humbling me. The board gave way, and I crawled through the dark house, reeking Rachel's perfume. Ethan followed, wincing as his bandages caught. The room was ransacked, cupboards open, clothes strewn. My heart stopped at the overturned closet. I dug through it, finding the hidden tin where I'd stashed our savings. Empty. "Where's my money?" I whispered, dread choking me. Rachel's voice came from the doorway, smug. "Oh, Jenny, that little cash? We used it to thank the neighbors for keeping this house running while Brian was away." Her lie was a slap, her disdain cutting deeper than the cold. That money, earned selling grain, skipping meals, was Ethan's future, stolen without remorse. "You thief!" I said, my voice shaking with fury. Rachel smirked, her eyes glinting. "You're so petty clinging to pennies. No wonder Brian chose me." Ethan stepped forward, his face pale but fierce. "You're a liar," he said, his voice raw. "That was for my college." Rachel's smirk faltered, but she turned away, her laughter echoing as she retreated to Brian's side. I sank to the floor, the empty tin in my hands. Ethan knelt beside me, his hand on my shoulder. He said, "We don't need their money," his voice steady despite his fever. "We've got each other." His strength, even now, reignited my purpose. I rummaged deeper in the closet, my fingers brushing a hidden compartment. Inside were my father's military medals, their cold metal a lifeline. "These," I said, holding them up, "are our way out." Ethan's eyes widened. "Grandpa's medals? You never talked about them." I nodded, the weight of my father's sacrifice grounding me. "He told me never to use them, but for you, I will." The medals gleamed, a promise of justice. Rachel's theft stripped our resources, but it was not our resolve. "We'll go to the military district," I said, my voice firm. "These will make them listen." Ethan nodded, his feverish eyes bright with hope. "I'll fight with you, Mom," he said, his voice a vow. The cold outside waited, but the medals warmed my hands. Rachel's shadow loomed, but Ethan's courage lit our path. We'd face the district tomorrow, and I'd ensure Brian's cruelty was answered to my father's honor. The village dawn was gray, the snow from last night's ordeal clinging to our boots as Ethan and I prepared for our journey. His fever had eased, but his bandaged back slowed his steps, each wince a reminder of Brian's cruelty. Rachel's theft of our savings left us penniless, but my father's military medals, clutched tightly in my hand, were our last hope. Ethan's eyes, still bright with resolve, met mine. "Are you sure they'll listen, Mom?" he asked, his voice rough but steady. I nodded, the medal's weight anchoring me. "They have to," I said. "Your grandfather's honor demands it." I sold my mother's only heirloom, a jade pendant, for enough to cover Ethan's medication and train fare to the military district. The pawnshop's cold coins felt like a betrayal, but Ethan's survival was worth more than sentiment. At the station, Ethan gripped my arm, his voice low. "I feel like we're running out of time," he said, glancing at the crowd as if Brian might appear. His fear mirrored mine, but his trust in me was a spark. "We're not running," I said, squeezing his hand. "We're fighting." The train's whistle pierced the air, and we boarded, the medals hidden in my coat. The military district's gates loomed like sentinels, their iron bars casting long shadows. Ethan's bandages drew stares, but he stood tall, his jaw set. A guard, his face carved with disdain, blocked our path. "State your business," he barked. "I said we're here to see Commander Sanders' superior," my voice firm. He sneered, eyeing my tattered coat. "You? Some beggar from the sticks? Get lost." In my past life, I'd begged here, showing our marriage certificate only to be dismissed as a troublemaker. This time, I'd be heard. I knelt on the frozen ground, spreading my coat like a canvas. I placed my father's medals upon it one by one, each a gleaming testament to his sacrifice. A crowd gathered, their murmurs growing as the guard's sneer faltered. "These are my father's," I said, my voice carrying. He was a decorated hero. "Do I qualify to see the commander's superior now?" The guard's face paled, his hand fumbling for his radio. "Wait here," he stammered, disappearing inside. Ethan knelt beside me, his eyes wide. "Grandpa did all that?" he whispered, touching a medal. "Why didn't you tell me?" I swallowed, the memory of my father's quiet pride surfacing. "He wanted a simple life," I said, "but now his honor will save you." Ethan's hand tightened on mine, his voice soft. "I want to be like him, Mom, someone you're proud of." His words, raw with a grandson's longing, strengthened my resolve. The gates creaked open, and 3 officers emerged, their olive green uniforms crisp, their silver hair glinting in the weak sun. One, a general with kind eyes, froze at the sight of the medals. "You're old Zhang's daughter," he said, his voice catching. "I served with him." He helped me to my feet, his gaze softening at my frostbitten hands and Ethan's bandages. "Comrade, what's happened?" he asked. I clutched the medals, tears spilling as I dropped to my knees. "Please," I sobbed, "save my son." Ethan knelt beside me, his presence steady despite his pain. "We need justice," he said, his voice clear. "My father betrayed us." The general's eyes hardened, but his touch was gentle. "Tell us everything," he said, leading us inside. The other officers followed their faces, a mix of shock and anger, already whispering of an investigation. In a stark office, I poured out our story: Brian's bigamy, Kevin's crimes, Ethan's framing, and the burns from the brazier. I showed Ethan's scarred arm, my deformed shin bone from saving Brian years ago. Ethan spoke, his voice breaking. "Dad chose his stepson over me. He let Kevin destroy my future." The general's jaw clenched his pen, scratching notes. He said this was a disgrace to the uniform, slamming his fist. "We'll launch a special investigation. Sanders' influence won't shield him." His words were a lifeline, the first sign the military would act. As we spoke, a clerk entered, whispering to the general. "The articles caused a stir," he said. "Families are demanding answers." The general nodded, his eyes meeting mine. "Your courage has shaken the district, comrade. We'll ensure justice." Ethan squeezed my hand, his feverish warmth grounding me. "We did it, Mom," he whispered, hope flickering in his eyes. I nodded, but my heart raced. Brian would fight back, and Rachel's cunning lingered. The medals had opened the door, but the battle was far from won. For Ethan, I'd face anything. The military district office was a fortress of stone and silence, its air thick with the weight of judgment. Ethan and I sat before a panel of officers, their uniforms stark against the room's gray walls. My father's medals rested on the table, their gleam a beacon of hope amidst my pounding heart. Ethan's bandaged back forced him to sit stiffly, but his eyes burned with defiance, his hand brushing mine in quiet support. The general, my father's old comrade, leaned forward, his face etched with resolve. "Comrade Jenny, tell us everything," he said. I took a breath, the memory of Ethan's burns and Rachel's theft fueling my voice. "Brian Sanders, my husband, has betrayed us," I began, my words steady. "He's kept 2 women in military housing, Rachel and me, his comrade's widow. He's framed my son, Ethan, for her son Kevin's crimes to protect his future." I detailed Kevin's hooliganism, the torn National Seed Program file, and Brian's violent assault that left Ethan scarred. I rolled up my pant leg, revealing my deformed shin bone, fractured, saving Brian from a battlefield. Ethan lifted his shirt, showing the blistered burns. "My father did this," he said, his voice raw but firm. "He chose his stepson over me." The officers' faces darkened, murmurs of outrage rippling through the room. I pressed on, my voice rising. Rachel orchestrated Ethan's framing, and Brian let it happen, stealing our savings and locking us in the snow. Ethan's gaze met mine, his nod urging me forward. I want justice, I said, clutching the medals. Investigate Brian and Kevin. Grant me a divorce. The general's pen paused, his eyes narrowing. These are grave accusations, he said, but your father's honor demands we act. We'll form a special investigative team. Before he could continue, the door slammed open and Brian stormed in, his face a mask of fury. Rachel trailed behind, her eyes darting nervously. What nonsense is this? Brian shouted, his hand rising to strike me. Ethan tensed, but the general in plain clothes moved faster, kicking Brian to the floor. You dare raise a hand against a hero's daughter? He roared. Brian scrambled up, his eyes wide with disbelief. A hero's daughter? He stammered, staring at me. I lifted the medals, their light blinding him. My father was Jang, decorated for valor, I said, my voice cold. You've shamed his legacy. Rachel collapsed to her knees, tears streaming, but her performance was hollow. I was tricked, she cried. Brian hid his marriage to Jenny. When Kevin erred, Brian forced him to frame Ethan. My son's innocent! Her words shocked Brian, his face paling as she threw him under scrutiny. Liar! He spat, raising his hand in a panic. I only kept a second wife, nothing more! Their accusations clashed like rabid dogs, each desperate to save themselves. Ethan's voice cut through, sharp and pained. You both planned this, he said, glaring at Brian. I heard you talking about the police, about Kevin's mistake. The general slammed his fist on the table, silencing them. Enough, he barked. The investigation will uncover the truth. Sanders, your rank won't shield you. He turned to me, his voice softening. Comrade, your evidence, medals, scars, the newspaper, has sparked public outrage. Witnesses from Kevin's school are coming forward, and we've seized financial records. Justice will be served. Ethan squeezed my hand, his eyes gleaming with hope. They're scared, Mom, he whispered. We're winning. Brian's gaze darted to me, pleading now. Jenny, we're husband and wife. Tell them I lost my way. I'll treat you and Ethan right. His desperation was pathetic, a shadow of the commander he'd been. Ethan stood, his voice steady despite his pain. You're no father, he said. You never were. I rose, my decision final. I want nothing from you but justice, I said, my voice unwavering. You and Rachel will answer for Ethan's suffering. Rachel's tears dried, her eyes cold with calculation, but she said nothing, her mask shattered. The general nodded, his face grim. He said Sanders, Rachel, and Kevin will be detained pending investigation. Jenny, Ethan, you'll be housed in the family compound. As soldiers led Brian and Rachel away, their protests faded into the hall. Ethan leaned against me, his feverish warmth a reminder of our cost. Did we do enough? He asked, his voice small. I hugged him tightly, the medals cool in my hand. We've started, I said. Your grandfather's honor opened the door. Now, we hold them accountable. The reckoning had begun, and I'd fight until Ethan's future was secure. The military family compound was a haven of warmth after the district's cold reckoning, its modest rooms starkly contrasting our village's drafty shack. Ethan and I settled in, his bandages fresh but his spirit buoyed by the general's promise of justice. The military medals rested on a small table, their gleam a reminder of my father's honor and our hard-won audience. Ethan traced one with a finger, his eyes distant. Do you think Grandpa would be proud of us? He asked, his voice soft but searching. I squeezed his shoulder, my heart swelling. He'd be proud of you, I said. You faced your father with courage. Outside, the military district buzzed with the fallout of our exposé. The newspaper's headline, Commander's Double Life, had ignited a firestorm, its ink staining Brian's reputation. Military wives gathered in the compound's courtyard, their voices sharp with indignation. Sanders thought he could play the hero while betraying his own, one said, her apron fluttering as she gestured. Another, cradling a child, spat. Rachel's no victim. She schemed for his rank. Their support warmed me, but whispers of dissent lingered. An older woman, her face creased with tradition, muttered, Divorce? Jenny's too ruthless. A wife should endure. Her words stung, echoing my fears of judgment, but Ethan's hand in mine steadied me. At the market, the story spread like wildfire. Vendors waved the newspaper, their shouts blending with the clatter of carts. Read about that scumbag Sanders, one called, thrusting a copy at a passerby. A mother scolded her son, Don't you dare grow up like Kevin, bullying the weak. Ethan overheard, his jaw tightening. "They're talking about us," he said, his voice a mix of pride and unease. "It's like the whole district knows." I nodded, the weight of our visibility pressing down. "They're on our side," I said, hoping it was true. "Their voices will push the investigation." The military school, Kevin's domain, became a battleground of truth. Administrators, spurred by the article, launched a probe into his behavior. Reports flooded in. Kevin had used Brian's rank to extort classmates, beating those who resisted and harassing girls who caught his eye. One victim, the daughter of a fallen soldier, had endured blackmail and assault in silence, her mother cowed by Brian's influence. Inspired by my stand, she acted. Clutching her husband's first-class medal, she knelt at the district gates, her daughter beside her, demanding justice. "If Jenny can fight, so can I," she declared, trembling but resolute. Her protest sparked a wave of outrage. Families of other victims rallied, their signs decrying justice for the martyrs' children. The district's gates became a stage, with reporters snapping photos and soldiers watching uneasily. Ethan and I passed by, his eyes wide at the crowd. "She's like you, Mom," he said, his voice thick with awe. "She's not afraid anymore." I swallowed, tears pricking my eyes. "We're not alone," I said, my resolve hardening. The public's fury was a shield, amplifying our cause, but it also raised the stakes. Brian's connections might retaliate. Inside the compound, a clerk delivered the news. The investigative team had seized Brian's financial records, uncovering diverted allowances meant for us. Witnesses from Kevin's school, emboldened by the protest, were testifying about his crimes. "The district's under pressure," the clerk said. "The leadership wants this resolved cleanly." Ethan's face lit up, but his voice was cautious. "Will it be enough to stop Dad?" he asked. I hesitated, the memory of Brian's rage flashing. "It has to be," I said, gripping his hand. "The truth is stronger than his rank." That evening, I met with a publicity officer, a kind woman who'd read our story. "Your courage is inspiring," she said, offering me a job writing for the district's newsletter. "Share your experience. It'll keep the pressure on." I glanced at Ethan, who nodded, his eyes bright. "Do it, Mom," he said. Let everyone know what they did. His encouragement, a son's faith in his mother, pushed me forward. I accepted, and my pen became a new weapon. As we returned, the courtyard hummed with voices, wives, soldiers, children, echoing our fight. "Jenny's a hero's daughter," one shouted, raising a fist. The district's pulse beat with our story, but doubt lingered. Brian's demotion wasn't inevitable, and Rachel's cunning could twist the narrative. Ethan sensed my worry, his voice soft. He said, "We've got the people with us," gesturing to the crowd. "That's something, right?" I hugged him, and his warmth reminded me of why I fought. The medals gleamed in our room, my father's legacy now a rallying cry. Society's echoes were loud, but the battle wasn't won. I'd harness every voice and protest for Ethan until justice silenced Brian's lies. The military compound's morning light filtered through our window, casting soft rays on the table where my father's medals gleamed, their honor now our shield. Ethan sat across from me, his bandages lighter, but his eyes heavy with anticipation. The investigative team's verdict loomed, a weight we'd carried since our stand at the district. "Do you think they'll pay, Mom?" he asked, his voice a mix of hope and doubt. I squeezed his hand, my reborn resolve steady. "They will," I said, the memory of Ethan's burns and Rachel's theft fueling my certainty. The truth is on our side. Spurred by public outrage and the martyr's mother's protest, the investigation had moved swiftly. Financial records revealed Brian's diverted allowances, while school witnesses detailed Kevin's extortion and assaults. That afternoon, the general summoned us to the district office, his face stern but kind. "The findings are clear," he said, spreading documents before us. "Kevin is convicted of hooliganism, blackmail, and framing Ethan. As a minor, he's sentenced to juvenile detention. Rachel, for sabotaging your marriage and aiding Kevin, gets 5 years in prison." Ethan's breath caught, his eyes wide. "And Dad?" he asked, his voice tight. The general's jaw tightened. "Brian's demoted to platoon leader for bigamy. He's ordered to repay your withheld allowances and restitution to Kevin's victims. His property, including Rachel's villa, is yours." I exhaled, the justice bittersweet. Brian's connections had softened his punishment, but his fall was real. Ethan's face hardened. "It's not enough," he said, his voice low. "He hurt us for years." I nodded, sharing his frustration, but the general's words held promise. The district's reputation demands accountability, he said. Brian's career is over. My divorce certificate arrived by dusk, severing my tie to Brian Sanders. The paper felt like freedom, and its ink was a testament to our fight. Ethan hugged me, his warmth a reminder of why I'd endured. "You're free, Mom," he said, his smile fragile but genuine. I ruffled his hair, pride swelling. "We both are," I said. The villa, now ours, was a start, but Ethan's future mattered more. The torn National Seed Program file was restored, but Ethan surprised me. "I want to join the program," he said, his eyes bright. "I've been trapped in the village too long. I want to see the country and make you proud." His choice, born of resilience, moved me. "You already make me proud," I said, my voice thick. "But if this is your path, I'll support you." Ethan grinned, his determination echoing my father's quiet strength. His decision to forge his way, despite Brian's betrayal, showed a spirit unbroken. I saw the boy facing his father with a stick, now a young man ready to claim his future. "I'll study hard," he promised, "become a teacher and help kids like me." His dream, simple yet profound, was a victory over Kevin's cruelty. The publicity department's offer became my lifeline. My first article, detailing our struggle, spread across the military's network, inspiring whispers in the compound. "Jenny's stories everywhere," a neighbor said, her eyes shining. Writing gave me purpose. Each word was a brick in Ethan's future, but a new possibility emerged. Colonel Martin Kwan, a widower who'd taken Brian's post. His wife had died in childbirth, and my story moved him to seek me out. The general introduced us, his smile warm. "Martin admires your strength," he said. "He's a good man." Martin's quiet demeanor and kind eyes stirred something in me, but I hesitated. Ethan's approval was paramount. "What do you think of someone new in our lives?" I asked Ethan that night, my voice cautious. He frowned, his protective streak flaring. "If he's not like Dad, maybe," he said, his tone guarded, "but he'd better treat you right." His concern, a son's love tempered by pain, touched me. I nodded, promising to tread carefully. Martin's respect for my fight was a start, but Ethan's trust would guide us. As we walked through the compound, children played, their laughter mingling with the wives' chatter praising our stand. "You've changed things," Ethan said, his voice soft. "People aren't afraid anymore." His words, a reflection of our impact, eased my doubts. The success of the investigation, the villa, my job, and Ethan's dreams were fruits of our courage. Brian's demotion and Rachel's imprisonment were justice, if imperfect. I'd build on this victory for Ethan, ensuring his light outshone the shadows of our past. The military compound bloomed with spring. Its cherry blossoms were a soft contrast to the battles we'd fought. My new home, the villa once Rachel's, hummed with life as I prepared for my wedding to Colonel Martin Kwan. Now taller and stronger, Ethan adjusted his jacket, his bandages gone, but his eyes wary. "You sure about this guy, Mom?" he asked, his voice a mix of protectiveness and hope. I smiled, touching his cheek. "Martin's kind, but I need your blessing." He nodded, his jaw tight. "If he makes you happy, I'll try," he said, his trust a hard-won gift. The wedding banquet buzzed with laughter, military families toasting our union. Martin, his uniform crisp, stood beside me, his quiet strength a balm after Brian's betrayal. Ethan watched from the crowd, his gaze sharp. Brian crashed through the doors as we exchanged vows, his platoon leader's stripes a pale shadow of his former rank. His forced smile didn't reach his eyes. "So this is Colonel Kwan," he sneered, eyeing Martin and marrying my cast-off, huh? Low standards. Martin stepped forward, his fist connecting with Brian's jaw. "Watch your mouth," he snapped, "or I won't be so gentle." Brian stumbled, blood trickling from his lip, but his desperation flared. "Jenny, give those medals to me. I can salvage my career." His plea was pathetic, a man clinging to lost power. I laughed softly, the sound cold. "Do you think my father's honor is yours to claim?" I said, my voice steady. "You got into the army because of him, Brian. His recommendation letter called you the son he never had." The room fell silent, gasps rippling through the crowd. Brian's eyes widened, memories of his rejected application surfacing. "Your father," he muttered, staggering back. I stepped closer, my words deliberate. "He saw potential in you, but you betrayed his daughter and grandson. Do you deserve his legacy?" Brian's face crumpled, his greed exposed. If he'd supported me more, I'd be a general, he shouted, his voice breaking. Martin blocked his lunge, soldiers restraining him. Ethan approached, his voice low. You had everything, Dad, and threw it away, he said, his eyes hard. Mom's better off without you. Brian's defiance faded, his shoulders slumping as he was led away, a disgraced shadow of the man he'd been. The banquet resumed, but Ethan's words lingered, his strength a testament to our journey. Later, Martin found me alone, his eyes gentle. Was I too harsh? He asked, referencing Brian. I shook my head. You defended me, I said, my cheeks warm, but Ethan's approval matters most. Martin nodded, his respect clear. Ethan returned dusty but determined days later from the National Seed Program. He tested Martin with a punch, his voice fierce. Hurt her, and I'll fight you. Martin sparred lightly, then saluted. He promised I'd make your mother happy, his sincerity winning Ethan's grudging nod. News of the antagonists arrived like echoes of a closed chapter. Kevin, unrepentant in juvenile detention, was killed in a gang fight, his victims among the attackers. Rachel, serving her sentence, went mad upon hearing of his death, and her ambition was reduced to raving. Brian retired, his reputation ruined, and he fled to a remote town, penniless after paying restitution. Ethan, reading my article about our story, shook his head. He said they got what they deserved, his voice calm but firm. A life for a life. His acceptance of their fates, tempered by his growth, eased my lingering anger. The compound's community embraced our triumph. Wives shared my articles. Their voices are loud in the market. Jenny showed us how to fight, one said, her daughter nodding. A school teacher used our story to teach integrity, and Kevin's crimes were a cautionary tale. Ethan's telegram from Xinjiang brought joy. He'd met a doctor with Doctors Without Borders, and their shared volunteering sparked love. I'm getting married, Mom, he wrote. I'm living the life you fought for. His words, a son's fulfillment, dissolved the last of my past life's bitterness. My life with Martin was quiet, but rich. He brought roses from trips, his small gestures healing years of neglect. I glowed again, my spirit reborn. Writing for the publicity department, I chronicled our journey, inspiring others to stand tall. Ethan's pride in me, Martin's love, and the community's respect were my new dawn. In my past life, I'd lost everything to timidity. Now, I'd given Ethan and myself the justice we deserved, our scars a testament to a future forged in courage.